And I'll actually touch upon something you had mentioned before, which I think actually hits it right on the nose. Before you were talking, you had touched about how the aura you get and the vibe you get from the music, it's very therapeutic, right? And over almost 2 years now, I've been mentoring at a juvenile detention center in Brooklyn, in Brownsville, teaching the youth there how to use music as a means of creative therapy, you know? And so it's really interesting what happens, because one of the first processes of creativity is imitation, you know? And so what happens is a lot of times is the kids are just regurgitating the things that they already know. So like you said, it's the examples that are given to them. And so it's so crazy to me to see the effect that not only I have, but my colleagues have on just being around them. And just, for example, there's this one kid, bro, when he found out that I had like DJ'd and stuff, he was like, wait, you get paid to do this? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, wait. I'm like, yeah, bro. I mean, the first DJ gig I did, I didn't get paid, but guess what? I did good. There was people there who saw me. They wanted me to DJ at another event. So when they asked me what my price was, I just told them a price. You know what I'm saying? So he was like, but the way that information processed for him, it was like, he didn't know that he had any other options. He didn't know that like he can do anything he wants to, you know? And so it's really a crazy thing to witness, that shift in their paradigm, you know? And for me, that's what my art is all about. You know, I really focus on making sure all of my content preaches general positivity, but also specific messaging about identity, self-actualization, manifestation, and spirituality. You know, so those are kind of like my core values. Everything I do is kind of centered around, you know, those things. When you really break down to what music is, well, what it really breaks down when you really look at what being an entertainer is. So when I look at the word entertainment, right, prefix and the suffix. So when you're entertaining, the suffix tain means to hold something in place, right? So when you're entertaining, you're holding something in place and you're putting something in it. You feel what I'm saying? So when you think about how humans have learned things throughout all mankind's history, how did we learn things? It was through stories and songs and fables, and, you know, so I actually see myself more as an edutainer, you know what I mean? And it's because I recognize the responsibility of being an influencer. You know, it's kind of like being a mutant. And in that sense, it's like, what are you going to use your superpower for? Are you using it to help people, or are you, using it for your own selfish gain? And for me, that's when I can't respect, how certain artists treat their platforms, not to name names or anything like that. But for me, like, that's kind of when it really grinds my gears, because it's almost like they don't respect themselves in a sense, I can't remember if it was Plato or Socrates, but one of them said something around the vein, I'm paraphrasing, of like, you only know true success once you know yourself. Something in that vein. I could be misquoting, but just piggybacking off of that, bro, it's really identity. I feel like the stronger the grasp you have on your identity, like, the more you can't be shaken, because your identity is your foundation. You know what I'm saying? So when you talk about your identity, you talk about things like, what are your core values? Which is something that I recently had to kind of reevaluate, ask myself, what are my core values? Because what you do from there is you develop your talents into skills that align with your core values. You feel what I'm saying? So that everything that you do in your life is consistent. Because I believe where, our psyche kind of gets all discombobulated is when there's inconsistencies in our life. You know, it's like, I value this, but yet, like, I value my, you know, creativity, yet I work a job that stifles it, you know? Or it's just a bunch of instances where that's the case, where these things don't match up, you know? And humans are smart, and we know when it doesn't. And I feel like people who suffer with anxiety, and honestly, I didn't even realize that I suffered from anxiety until like maybe a few months ago, because I didn't even know that having anxiety was being worried about the future. I didn't even know that, right? See, because I'm the type of person where it's like, I have a lot of trouble being present because my mind is so ethereal. I'm always like thinking out there, like basically I'm down the block and around the corner before I even leave my house. You know what I'm saying? And because of that, it makes me do things like, oh, forget my keys, you know? And so I start seeing the repercussions of things like that throughout my whole life, and it shows up in my relationships and all those things. So it's those moments where you have to be real with yourself, and you have to really be self-reflective and introspective and really honest, you know? And we were talking about quarantine before, and I mean, bro, even though I was moving around a lot, within those moments, you know, I was definitely kind of forced to take a look in the mirror and really be like, man, one, you don't spend any time with yourself, you know? And then two, you don't really spend time being present with others. And so it was only when the first process of fixing the problem is addressing the problem. And so once I was able to kind of identify what those things were for me, it just gave me more of a foundation and more of a grounding and level head, in that now I know where to start in attempting to overcome these things, you know? And I think those are the things that draw people to me, you know, because they see the strides that I make. Because, like, don't get it misconstrued, bro. I'm only a human too. And like, there's been moments recently where, you know, I had a moment of real vulnerability, you know? And it is important that people are able to be vulnerable, you know? So I think that taking all those things into account, like, is really, you know, the forces that drive my music, you know? And I really want for people to go through this process of growth with me, you know? And like, and we were talking about the whole idolization thing before, and I'm really, you know, against that. I'm into examples, you know? Holding someone to idolatry is basically comparing them to a deity, whereas someone who's an example, right? It's like, in that instance, you know, like it's very specific, you know? So, because it's like all the examples of good men in my life have their downfalls, but they were good examples, and that's how I've been able to lead my life, is through, you know, the examples that I had around me.